Hello again, everyone. Today I'm going to be painting this landscape. You can see the picture on my phone here. It's some trees, a pathway, a little fence running alongside, and you can see the sky in the background and the distant trees here. I've roughly sketched it out on my cold pressed Zen Art 100% cotton block paper. I've sketched in the pathway. I don't know whether you can see, but I've got my horizon line at the base of these trees here. A few suggestions of the trees and the suggestion of the fence and a little gate there. I've put a line here across where the gate is because there's some light falling across the pathway there in the photograph. You can barely see it, but it's in the distance there. I haven't practiced this. This is straight off the cuff. And I think today I'm going to start by using my, I think it's a 1 inch flat De La Rowney graduate brush, which is that one, to lay in the sky first. So I'm going to wet my brush and then I'm going to wet the sky area. So in watercolour, we work from light to dark. The sky is the lightest area. So I'm going to start with that. So I want it wet, but I don't want it absolutely sopping. So I've got my handy kitchen roll at the ready here, which I am going to use in a minute if I get any drips. So nice wet across the sky area. Just get some roll ready to, I just got this ready first really, but never mind, to just mop up some of those drips there. So to do that, I've dried my brush off so that it hasn't got much water on. I'm just running it along the base of where I've taken the wet up to pick up the drips. So for my sky colour, I think I'm going to have ultramarine blue, just a touch of. So let's mix some of that. And I think I might put a little bit of a pink colour. I think this is rose. I'm not entirely sure, but because the sky does seem to have a little bit of purple in it. Mix that together so I get a nice purpley blue colour, more on the blue than the purple side. Put a little bit more water with it so it's quite wet. Now before I go into that to put it on my sky, I'm going to dry my brush because I don't want too much water. I've already got water on the top of my sky area. I'm just going to lay that across from top to bottom across the sky area and down to the tree line in the distance. I'm not worrying about going over these tree trunks here because they're going to be darker area anyway. So actually I could take some of that down into the trees because they are going to be a greeny colour, and if they are quite damp, when I go to put in the wash, it will diffuse nicely, give me nice soft edges on those trees. Okay, rinse off my brush and dry it off. Now I think I'll put a suggestion of those trees in the distance in now while the paper's still damp. So I'm going to use my, let's have a look. It's a round brush. It's a Cotman around 111. Now for this, I'm going to mix up. They're quite bluey coloured, so I'm going to go for, I think this is Hooker's Green. Pop some of that into that mixture I've already got on my paper and drop some of that into those trees. It's brighter towards the bottom, but I'm starting at the top, so I'm just going to drop some of that in here and there. Because it's damp, I should get some nice soft edges to the tops of those trees, hopefully. I'm going to put a little bit of, I think this is lemon yellow, just here and there, just to lighten some of those front trees here. Just drop that in, mix it in with the colour I've already got, and of course I've got my base colour underneath that, which is the ultramarine blue and the, I think it's rose. The paints I'm using are Mission Gold, Magellan Mission Gold, I'm not quite sure what all the colours are. I have got a colour chart on the wall, which I could look at, I suppose. But I've got a squeaky chair, so if I move about too much, my chair's going to creak. But yeah, I think that was lemon yellow I've popped in there. So that's just brightened up those trees there. Now, I think I'm going to start on this pathway while that's drying off. So I'm just going to lay in some water. So I'm going to work wet and wet on this. Now the pathway is sort of like a dark pinky brown colour. It has got red tones in it, or pink tones in it. And of course we have that lighter area over the top there where it crosses. So I'm going to use, let's have a look here. I think I'll use that rose colour again since I've used it once already. And water that down. Dry off my brush before I pick the pigment. And I'm going to just pop some of that into that lighter area there. Soften that up towards where it's going over the grass. Just to mix that in a bit more and give it some soft edges there. Okay, that's that bit done. And for this area here, I'm going to add some of my ultramarine blue into that mix, I think, so I get more of a pinky purple than the bluey purple that I had. Now this is the first wash, so I will be going back over this later to add more depth and more tone. But I just want a suggestion here now of where the path is. A bit more ultramarine, I think, there. A little bit more of that pink colour into that. Just drop some of that into here so that it diffuses. Obviously, the closer the path gets to us, the viewer, the darker and more full of pigment the paint will appear, to create the illusion that it's closer to our eyes than the further distance. Right, I'm going to leave that one for now then. And now I'm going to work on that lovely bright yellow field that is really the highlight. It stands out against all the darks in this picture. So I'm going to go back to my large flat, which I'm going to wet. Make sure it's nice and clean because I don't want to taint that area with any other pigment. Not too saturated, just wet enough. And I'm going to wet over this area here. I'm not going to bring it right down to that path because I don't want it to run into that at the moment. I'm going to take it up to those trees. They've dried off. I'm not sure whether they're completely dry. There we go. Now again, I'm going to mix up, get some of that running water off the bottom there with my almost dry brush. Just mop it up. Now for this colour here, I think we will go for the lemon yellow. Maybe a little touch of sap green, just to green it up a little bit. That's a nice colour. And then I'm going to lay that across. Nice bright colour. Okay, if we get any drips, we just pick it up with our brush. I forgot to say my board is angled at about 45 degrees on my tabletop easel, and I have a tray behind it, which I like to use because I can put lots of stuff on the tray when it's not up on the board. When I'm sketching and things, when I'm sat sketching, the tray's really handy actually. So I've laid in that. Now I'm going to work on this little area here, which is in shade, so that I thought that brush was clean, but it's got a little bit green, but it doesn't matter because the green tone's in that anyway. So I'm wetting that area there. And then I'm going to drop some of this darker green that I used for the trees into here, just for now. And up here into the distance a little bit. There we go. Now I'm just going to see if my sky is dry. Yes, it's dry. So I might put the base. No, actually, I'm going to do this little bit here and here where the there's bushes and things behind the fence. So again, I'm going to mop up some of that, so I don't want it to drip down too much into this area. It's still nice and wet. Actually, I'm going to paint that fence the same colour as the field because it's highlighted. I'll go back in later and add some more tones to that, but for now I'm going to have it that colour. And I'm going to put some of this green mixture that I made earlier for the distant trees, and I'm just going to lay it in there for now, where these bushes and things are there. I'm going to take it out to that field so it does diffuse slightly. I'm going to paint around that post because I want to keep that nice and bright for now. There we go, up to there. And also with this green, I'm not going to start on the actual trees, but I'm just going to make some dabby for the foliage with my brush here and there, across here. And there's some distant trees over here too. Make that maybe a little bit of yellow ochre into that to warm it up a little bit here, where there's a more warm coloured tone to that tree in the background, and there's some more here. And also, just to warm it up a little bit, a bit of raw sienna dropped into there too. There we go. Just going to touch up on that pathway there in the distance. And now I think I will let that dry off. But before I do, I've just noticed I've got some orange. I think it must be the start of autumn because I do have a suggestion of some leaves here at the side. Now I could leave them out, but it's quite a nice colour. I think this is, I'm not sure what this colour is. It's an orange colour. It's not my Mission Gold. It's another one I've put on this palette here. But I'm just going to lay some of that in here. It may not even show through after I've finished because I'm going to put another colour on top later. But for now, I'm just going to lay some of this down here. You can choose some raw sienna for this if you wanted, or another orange colour that you've got on your palettes. You don't have to use what I'm using because I'm not sure what it is. Just going to lay some of that. And my path, I think it might be drying off, but I'm just going to suggest there. There we go. I quite like that orange colour actually, it looks quite nice. For now, I'm just going to leave that to dry off slightly before I start the next phase. That's the initial first wash. I've more or less covered the entire paper there. I've worked the sky, I've worked the background trees, the first wash, and the field, the pathway, the darker hedge area here behind the fence and some of the foliage there in the foreground. Or actually it's in midground, I think that is. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry off and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, so for the next phase then, now I've mixed up on my palette a mixture that I'm going to be using on this pathway to put a second coat on. It's a mixture of the quinacridone rose, I think it's called, if I can pronounce that right, which is the rose I've been using, mixed with a little bit of no, actually not burnt sienna, raw sienna, and some burnt umber. So that's just giving it a bit more tone and it's appearing a little bit darker now. I'm working wet on dry for this, so I've dried off my brush before I've dipped it in my paint, and I'm just going to see what that looks like by running it up to my highlighted pathway area. I'm using my large flat at the moment. I'll pop more of that in just to strengthen it a little bit. My first initial layer with the purpley colour that I put on with my ultramarine and my rose is still there. It's faintly showing through this second layer. Carefully pop some of that just above that highlighted area there, up to the distance. There we go. Take it up to those suggestion of leaves. Now I'm just using a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of ultramarine to get a darker colour. It's a darker brown, and I'm adding a bit of water to that to water it down slightly. And I've got my Cotman round brush here. I'm drying my brush off before I dip back into it. And I'm going to put some of that here and there in this path. Now the path's damp, so it will diffuse. I'm just putting it towards the edge of that path and then running some of it along into the path as well. There we go. It just adds a little bit of extra tone to the edges there. Now where it's meeting these leaves, I'm dabbing more. Trying to go around the orangey colour if I can. There. Now I'm debating whether to go over that field again with my yellow, just to make it really stand out, because it really is the brightest area. It will stand out anyway, because once I've done my really dark tones, it's going to pop. But I think I'll just put a little bit more of my lemon yellow over the field area. I'm working wet on dry again here, just to brighten that up. I'm going around that fence post this time, taking it up to that fence post. I really want that area to stand out when I finish the picture. Okay, that's nice and bright now. Actually on the camera the yellow looks more of a golden yellow, but actually on my paper it's more of a greeny yellow. So now back to the bush area. I think I'll work down here. I have a little bit of a cauliflower going on here, so I'm just dampening the paper here and there, and then I'm going to use my hooker's green, which is the darker green, and drop in some bits and bobs here. Add some more water, soften up to the path. It's still slightly damp. Pop some of that path colour in between. I'm just using what I've got on my palette at the moment. I'm not mixing up any fresh colours. I'm just playing around with it. So the darker colour I've got on my palette is mixing in with those green tones and diffusing. Take it up to the path. Most of the picture is quite dark apart from that field and the sky area. Now I'm going to add some foliage to these foreground or midground trees here. So I've got my hooker's green and I'm going to mix a bit of burnt umber into that to give me a darker green, a darky browny green that is. Now I might need to go darker later, but for now this will do for the second wash. And these trees here, there's a lot of foliage around. I'm literally just dabbing it in. You don't have to copy the picture exactly. There we go. A little bit more brown here and there, and maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue in with that as well, just to give it more of a dark tone. See where I'm dropping it into that already wet foliage, it's diffusing nicely, but there's going to be some hard edges too where the paper's dry underneath. It just gives a nice effect. Like I said, this area on all of the foliage and the tree area, apart from that field, is all really dark. And now we have some more foliage back here on one of these trees. You can barely see that sky wash now. Mix a little bit of that burnt umber into that, where the trees are on the turn, I think, up the back there. Back to the bluey green, darkening it up slightly, overlapping these trees here, just building a canopy. And then I'm going to go back to these ones here that you can barely see because the wash has dried and it's dried quite light. I'm softening up and wet some of this area here so that it's nice, and I'm using the same brush. The round, going down here, just varying some of these green tones up. Put a little sap in there, although sap's quite light, but it's a strong green, and it will mix on the paper anyway with the other greens. Make sure I take it up to the edge of my paper there. Trying to make it appear more like leaves. Now, there's not that many leaves on this foreground tree, but I will put a suggestion here and there on here. Now they're quite dark too, so I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue again to that to darken it. Drop that into that wet bit of paper that I've created there, and then a little bit here and there here around where I'm going to put the branches. mix up the tone a bit, put a bit of brown in there. It's all about illusion. It's creating the illusion of trees and branches. And this one here, this tree here, hasn't got much at all on it. I'll add a little bit. We'll go back into that later and strengthen it all up a bit anyway. So now I'm going to go back to these distant trees, and I think I'll re-wet those so that I can put some darker tones into these. I'm not wetting all of it, just some of it. Just running my brush up and down with water at the moment here and there. And I've got that darker green, and I'm going to pop some of that in around. Now the base of those trees is pretty dark. I'm going to put a little bit of indigo with that green too, or maybe too much on there, to really create a little bit of dark under here. I use indigo quite a lot. It's quite a nice dark tone. Sort of a bluey greeny tone. Try and straighten that up a bit. And while we've got the indigo on the brush with that green, I'm going to add some to this too. Here, because this is very dark in the picture, in the reference photo. And some in here underneath. Just gives shadow under the branches, this tree canopy. Back to the greeny colour to drop more into this. Still slightly damp, so it's holding its own, softly diffusing, but not too much. Connecting those shapes there. This shape of the field line with this distant trees and things here. Well, I've got the indigo and the green. I'm popping some in here too. This has still got a little bit of water in it, so it's not completely hard edges. It's nicely diffusing. So this is the green mixture. I used the hooker's green with a bit of burnt umber, and now I'm also got a little bit of indigo that I'm tapping in on top just to darken it slightly. Rinsing off my brush. Now the hedge area here, I think I'll go in with that indigo and green here too. Some of this is very dark. Back onto dry paper. I want to be careful to keep that fence post light. This is sort of greeny shrubbery, so I'm going to go in with a hooker's green too. And remember, this is in the foreground, so it appears to be stronger in colour and tone than the distant bushes and trees. Just taking this up a bit. To that fence post here and there. Little twiggy bits there sticking up, so I'm just flicking up with a brush. There. running it along to that fence there in the distance. I think I'll add a bit more burnt umber in there too. It's just a case of mix and match really, just to get the right darks and tones that you want. And this foreground area, like I said before, should appear to be brighter and more visible. There we go. Now next I think I'll start on some of these tree trunks. I could switch brush, but I think I'll stick with this one for now. Now for these tree trunks I'm going to use the indigo, which is a nice dark colour, and the burnt umber. So I get a very, very, very dark brown, almost grey brown really. Now I'll start with this one here. It's going to diffuse over that area there because it's still damp, but that doesn't matter. It could be little twiggy effects coming out of the tree. I'll take it down to the bush. Right up to the top. Like that. Painting twigs and branches isn't my favourite, but I'll have a go. Now I'm going to switch brushes, I think, here. I'm going to switch to my rigger, which is better for doing branches because it's got a long line of bristles, so that it picks up a lot of paint actually for the size of the brush, and it's very good for lines, tree branches and things. But you tend not to have as much control over this brush, I think, but I do quite like it. And it's good because it flicks and it's a bit unpredictable, to be honest. Now some of these branches are disappearing where the foliage goes. And then meeting on the tree. There's quite a lot of twiggy branches coming out of this tree, so I'll just hint at those. It's just sort of jaggedy strokes with the brush. Well, that'll be enough for now on that one. Let's pop this one in here, this long thin tree. It comes down to the bush. Up. See some of it through here. And then this one here. It'd be better to start with the round brush at the base because it's thicker, but I'm not going to switch brushes just yet. I'll keep with the rigger. just creating the illusion really of branches and twigs and things on that tree. And then we have a tree here, a tree stump here, or tree trunk should I say, not stump, for this tree. And one just here in the background. Just strengthening up some of this on this one here, these darks. And then we're going to go for our main tree trunk. So again, the indigo, mix up a little bit more of that with my burnt umber to get a really dark colour. And I'm going to switch brushes for this one because it's bigger. And I'm going to use this round again here, and I'm going to start here. Brush is quite wet, so that it's not quite as dark as I'd like it, or strong. But it's just laying that to start with so that we can then work into it. Remember that fence post there. Let's go over the top there and bring this down the side so that fence post pops out a little bit. There, that's it. Dropping more colour in while it's damp. Oh, my stomach. Don't know whether you heard that. It's time for some lunch. There we go, we have our big main tree trunk. I'll just pop some more indigo in that just to really darken an area on the side there up. Nice thick paint that is, freshly squeezed. And I'm going to start with some branches. Still using the round at the moment, but I'm going to switch to the rigger in a minute. Switching brushes, rigger. To get some more twiggy shaped lines. I have a few coming out here. I'm not even looking at the photo, I'm just going about it. Well, I think it needs to have these little twiggy things. I'm just making that appear that the tree trunk comes down lower, but you can just see it through some of these bushes there. That's better. And also I'm going to strengthen up with the rigger this dark here where the bushes are. Some of this dark tone I've just used for the tree. joining those trees together with the darker tone. Into the distance there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go along here, strengthen up this dark line and straighten it out a little bit if I can. I don't want a perfectly straight line, but for now I'm just straightening it for the base of the trees, and then I'm going to go in and work it up above those trees so that I have something with the rigger like this. Gone down a bit there. So it just breaks that sharp dark line up and gives the suggestion of some tree trunks and things back here in the distance. Put a bit of water in there and then drop some of this in. Using the side of the rigger just to create this bushy tree canopy feel in the background here, where there might be some shadow. Working on dry. There we go. Now I've left this area quite bare at the moment, but now I'm going to mix some of that lemon yellow with some of this green and put some across where this lighter area is on the path to lead up to this tree here with the rigger brush. Because the sun's shining on that part, it's slightly lighter in tone and colour. I'm darkening that bit around these distant trees here because the sun's not shining on that part. I may need to darken that again. I'm just dipping into what I've got on my palette, the different shades of green that I've created, and using that to darken that up. So there's a distinction between this lighter area where the sun's catching it. Now I think I might start on the fence. So I've got this dark greeny colour on my palette here, and I'm just going to run that down the fence, one side of this fence post here. And then here, across there and down. One side of the fence seems to be lighter. Now for this very, very distant fence, I'm going to darken it up so it stands out a little bit. So back into my indigo there. Just to create the feel of a fence. Strengthen that a little bit there. Join the shapes. And here. There we go. Now, as you can see, we're getting some really darks in there, which is helping the right of the field to pop. I think we need to go a bit darker on this pathway. All I've done was maybe some of that into these bushes a little bit more here as well, with a bit more I just go in, and now I'm just strengthening up some of this foliage here, just connecting shapes. I think I need a little bit of that dark as well. I've now switched to my round brush as well in here. Just water now just to soften it up. Back into the Hooker's Green as well. Stronger paint though, not so much water. Dabbing again. Indigo. Right, so I'm going to add a third wash to my pathway because I'm not happy with how light that's appearing. So I've still got my mixture on the palette. I think it was the, what did I use for this? Raw Sienna, Connectome Rose I think I used, and a little bit of burnt umber. It's got a bit of my indigo mixed in the burnt umber, but that's okay, it's just darkened it up a bit. Now, using the round, almost dry brush effect really on here. So some of that second wash and first wash is still showing through slightly. But I'm just darkening up the pathway. And I'm going to try and connect these two bits, even though this is lighter. It's looking a bit on its own, stood out there. So I'm just connecting. I don't want to lose that lightness, but I want it to appear connected, not just standing alone in the middle of this other path. And I'm going to add some distant greenery over in this area. So I'm wetting the paper first, and then I'm going to go back in with my green colour, Hooker's Green. Mopping it up so that it doesn't drip right down into that path. That was lifting it out a bit of the colour there because it was too wet and it was dripping into the path. Now I'm just going to add a bit more. Into the background here. Suggestion of bushes and trees and things. It's all a question when you're painting of keep looking at your picture, even though you might have put something down first. If you feel it needs something else, go over it again. As long as you don't overwork and go over too many times, you shouldn't lose that freshness that watercolour can give you. It's such a lovely medium. And if you get it right, it can be really lovely. We don't always get it right though. A lot of practice, but practice makes perfect, and that's what it's all about. Now I'm dry brushing these leaves here. I'm going to add a little bit of this lighter path colour to some of these trees to warm them up a bit here because I think they're on the turn in the background there. And then now back over to that pathway. I'm dipping into where I put that orange earlier just to give the appearance of different tone in there. But I don't want to lose the feel of those leaves that have dropped. from the trees. Now I think I'm going to go and work this fence post here. So I'm going to go for yellow ochre, I think, for that. A warm tone. Just actually I'll go up down to the bottom with that. There's a bit of shadow on that side, so I'm going to the bluey green colour I've got and laying that on top just to shadow it slightly here. There. Now we've got some sort of fence line running across from the fence, so I'm going to hint at that using my rigger, and I want a dark colour so that it shows up. There we go. Maybe another bit underneath that just to make it look a bit more even. My fence, bit of shadow under there, I think. Just take that dark up there under these distant trees below the path. I think I may need to strengthen that tree there. So indigo, burnt umber, just this one here. And this one here. And while we're at it, we'll go back in and add some more lines into this one. Maybe a few twiggy bits. Coming out from the base of the tree trunk. I'm still not happy about how dark this is. I think it needs to be darker, so I'm popping some of this in. It's all about the contrasting tones between the lights and darks that makes the picture pop. So I want really strong darks to make that field jump. I think my neighbour's doing some woodwork in the shed. I can hear lots of sawing. It's quite a nice day out there today, actually. I was thinking of cutting the grass later if I get a chance. And stepping back, I still need to go darker on that foreground. The path. Just need to make it darker so that everything else, because it is in shadow really, everything else then will look. Now I'm just really using what I've got on my palette, just a mixture of everything, but more tending to the browns than the greens to go across this path with a dry brush. So it's burnt umber with a little bit of that indigo, I think it is, that I'm using here. I may actually go in with that orange again and just make those leaves a bit more prominent. On the rigger. I've got to be careful because I don't want to overwork. I'm just good. This is the last little bit of faffing I'm going to do, making this orange stronger. She says she's probably too small in a minute. And then this lighter area on the path, I'm gonna slightly darken so that it blends in more with the actual pathway, but you still get the hint that it's lighter there. And the leaves and bushes here, grasses. Suggestion of okay, I think I'm going to call it a day then. Otherwise, I really will start overworking. Hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully, I'll be making more videos. So I hope to see you again and for you to join me again